I'm a physician, so it is important to know that PTSI is a stress-induced neurobiological injury, meaning there is actual brain change that happens when somebody is traumatized emotionally. Injury is what happens to you. Disorder, it is wrong with you. If you think about what that means, if people blame you for things or makes you think that something is really wrong with you, you know something's wrong, but it's not specific. So this talk may be triggering. For those of you who have been through trauma, out of the number of people here, there is a reasonable amount of people who've been traumatized. We're going to be talking about PTSD, suicide, and things like that. So if you know that triggers you, the last thing I want to do is hurt you. I'm a clinician, so I try to take care of people, not hurt them. But before we get into all of that, let's ground ourselves. Everybody who would like to do it, again, you don't have to do it, but if you can put your hand on your chest, take a deep breath, in 1,000, out 1,000, in 1,000, out 1,000. What you've actually just done is activate the vagus nerve. Vagus is opposite the fight and flight system. God gave us that ability to calm ourselves down. This is a story about real hope. It is kind of heavy, but I promise you one of the, or maybe the heaviest things about it is my accent. Let me tell you about that. I was born in Ukraine. I'm not a great linguist. I'm much better at science. So one of my advisors said, you got to get rid of that accent. It's like when you go on TV, we don't know what you're saying. Well, okay, so they sent me this thing. It's called accent eradicators. It's a real thing, shockingly. I spent 3 hours reading this book into this phone. They said, we have some good news and bad news. The good news, you speak 85% standard English. 15%, my wife and I are still debating what that is. So if you forget something, I'm so sorry. It's the best I can do. This is a picture, is Cook County Hospital. I finished medical school in Northwestern in 1984, and then I was doing surgical procedures at Cook County Hospital. Pretty rough place to be. And there's one day that I got an emergency phone call from my father. Usually you don't get it. Emergency phone call when you're operating on people. My father said, your mother just took her life. That day completely changed the trajectory of my life, medical career, and me as an individual. So this is a picture of my mother. Her name was Mary. She was a great doctor and a wonderful human being. Unfortunately, PTSD actually killed her. I'm definitely not a psychiatrist. I'll start with that. So I did surgery, I did trauma surgery, I did anesthesia, and I ended up as a pain doctor. But psychiatry was the farthest away from me. My mother saw her psychiatrist the day before she took her life. So my view of psychiatry is not the best. And there are some psychiatrists here, but I told them it's not going to be pretty for psychiatry a little bit. So it's really useful to remember that trauma, PTSD, and suicide are all linked. Clearly, if somebody has PTSD, it changes something in the body. That something is actually much more complex than you think. There is inflammation, there is brain change. All of that can lead to suicidal ideation and completion of suicide. Based on WHO data, 70% of people in the globe have traumatic events. In the modern world, I think that number is hopeful, not realistic. I think that number is much worse now. With the number of wars which are going on and everything else, I think most of us are stressed more or less. So it's also useful to remember the history. The term PTSD was only introduced in 1980. The Romans, 2,000 years ago, had a different word for it. It's called the tremble. World War I brought us shell shock. World War II, battle fatigue. The 60s brought us Vietnam syndrome. And then in 1980, DSM-3 came up with the term PTSD. The interesting thing, the names keep changing, the symptoms are the same. Hypervigilance, can't sleep, anger, depression, suicide. Nothing's changed. Romans were going through the same thing as we're going today. So it is likely that 25% of people currently in the United States have PTSD. Multiple causes things can cause PTSD, be it military trauma, be it rape, be it being robbed, various events such as Katrina and things like that, bad earthquakes, any of that can cause PTSD. In fact, I was giving a presentation in the military museum, and this veteran was saying, "You mean my PTSD is the same as a woman that was just something happened to her?" I said, "Yes." And he got very upset with me. I said, "Are you trying to tell me that your PTSD is worse for somebody who was chained to a sink and raped for 10 years? He lost interest in debate at that point. I actually took care of a patient like that. Unfortunately, it's a real example. So by show of hands, who here thinks the biggest group of people with PTSD are military and first responders? What do you think? You're right, it's a trick question. But it turns out you're wrong. Everybody who pegged the hand was wrong. So, and by a large margin. So 1 out of 3 women in the United States are sexually attacked in their lifetime. Half of them develop PTSD. So it's not, those numbers are not even close to military operations and things like that. So the more people understand that, the more recognition kind of dawns upon us. The most insidious form of PTSD, I believe, is secondary PTSD. That is a term, that's a clinical term, means that when somebody has PTSD, they can give it to somebody like a virus. Sounds weird. I've had a number of, especially women, go, "I've never been to war, I've never had serious attack on me. How can I have PTSD? I have all the symptoms, but where do they come from?" Well, turns out if you have unpredictability, fear, walking on eggshells, no safety, it can lead to PTSD. My father was a flyer during World War II. He had, out of 10,000 people who he served with, 100 made it home. So he had horrible PTSD. He came home, he gave it to my mother and gave it to me. So she took her life, I got treated, and here I stand today. But I've done something good with it, I hope. So if you look at the suicide numbers in the United States, 135 suicides per day. This is based on 2022 report. That is the highest number since World War II, 1941. Those numbers are optimistic by today's standards. They're worse now. So the question is, we're spending a huge amount of effort on drugs, psychotherapy, and the like. So why are people dying? That includes also preteen. The number of suicides currently in preteens is the highest it's ever been. If you think about it, 9 to 12-year-olds killing themselves, like, what's going on, right? Well, then the question becomes, why can't you just snap out of PTSD? Just like that. No PTSD, everything's good. Oh, thanks for, you don't have to have PTSD, snap out of it, no problem. Well, it doesn't work like that. For those of you who have tried that, not so good. This is what happens biologically. This is a little bit simplified what happens neurobiologically. When I write a paper, it has a lot more errors, a lot more structures. There's only one structure you have to know, actually 2. Amygdala and stellate ganglion. So if you look at that nasty picture there, the information goes from the eyes to the amygdala. The job of the amygdala is to prevent something bad happening to you. So when the amygdala sees that, it goes, "Ah, oh my God, what's going on?" If it's long enough or strong enough, it activates the fight or flight system. The controller for that is stellate ganglion. As you can see, the on switch. If it's stuck like that, it stays like that. So this is kind of more medical. I published that in 2009. So when somebody has severe trauma, extra nerves grow. So new wires you can think of, but each one of those nerves produces more norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is what gets people revved up, hypervigilant, things like that. It's a main transmitter of PTSD. So people talk about, like, when I give lectures at military fundraisers, things like that, people still talking about invisible wounds. We're not talking about years ago. We're not talking about 1915. We're talking in 2025. last year. And everybody goes, oh, PTSD is an invisible wound. That is a crazy statement. Because PTSD is visible, all you need is the right scanner. The right scanner is functional MRI. You can actually see which part of the brain is activated. You can actually say, this person has PTSD and this one doesn't. So to me, that's actually reality, right? Instead of just another term and a construct. If you look at the pictures with the red circles, the one above that, the big red circle, has a big blue blob. Very technical term. So that's what PTSD looks like in the real world. So I was lucky enough to have come up with an intervention that can take the big blue blob and make it a small blue blob. That's a deactivation of amygdala. So if you can calm the amygdala down, everybody gets nice and calm. So the first person that I was treated for PTSD that I treated, basically I took an old procedure that's been done since 1925 called stellate ganglion block. We did an injection in the neck where we numbed up the stellate ganglion. And the symptoms of this man who was attacked during his robbery and on his way to be admitted to psychiatric ward 2 months later, we did the procedure, he didn't have to be admitted. So his symptoms went away in 10, 15 minutes. So this is what happens. If you look at those big red wires in the head, gone. What it seems to do is bring it back to the pre-trauma state. A simple injection of bupivacaine, which is an old local anesthetic that's used in women in pregnancy. And the results could be immediate, which is the best part. Being a male, I'm not very patient, and I don't really like to wait for things. So I like to things happen now. And somebody's suffering, they've suffered 50 years, they'd like to get out of it now, not wait for another couple of years and do this and it doesn't work. If you look at this amygdala, now it's chill, right? That could happen in 5 minutes because norepinephrine level drops like a stone. And it happens almost immediately, which is great. The change in the brain may take a couple of weeks, but the norepinephrine level drops and symptoms really decrease. So let me tell you a real person. That's one of my favorite patients, Sergeant Dennis Finley. So Sergeant Finley was in Vietnam, and he got injured in Vietnam when he was 19 years old. I got to see him 50 years later. So he had 50 years of suffering of PTSD. We did an injection on him. He cried like a baby for 30 minutes. I came over and I thought, oh my God, I broke this guy. Why is he crying? He said, hey, Doc, I have not felt an emotion for 50 years. He was able to reunite with his family. He stopped drinking, went back to work in his 70s. The picture of him was 3 years after the procedure at a fundraiser. Two of his sons came over and said, thank you so much for giving us father back. He's nice, he's polite, he's not mean. He's like a normal guy. So that's why I really like this procedure, for obvious reasons. This is the first SGB baby. Let me tell you her story. The young man next to her is her father. He was, and still is, a firefighter. Severe PTSD. He shared his PTSD with his wife, secondary PTSD. They have been trying to conceive for 20 years. So I do the procedure on him. He calls me back 2 years later. He said, I feel great. He said, that's nice, blah, blah, blah. And he says, no, you don't understand. We conceived the day after the procedure. Wow. It's like, I said, I had nothing to do with it. Thank you. I'm not involved. However, what do you think they called the baby? Jordan, for Michael Jordan, because they conceived in Chicago. Cute young lady. Turns out humans are not the ones to get PTSD. Dogs get PTSD too. The technical term is VPTSD, veterinary PTSD. 25% of the animals or the military dogs that came back from Iraq have VPTSD. Shockingly, symptoms are the same. Hypervigilance, they're looking around, they can't sleep, they're angry, or they're submissive. So let me introduce you to my other friend, Reno. Reno was a lovely little dog, and he was being trained to be a companion dog for a veteran. He got caught under a truck and got burned. So after that, he became a different animal. Hypervigilant, trying to eat himself out of cages. Definitely could not be doing his job. He developed the Xanax habit. We did the block on him. This was a little write-up about us. Xanax habit went away, and he became a nice, pleasant pup. Again, when people tell me, well, we don't understand PTSD, this is real. There's no lying. The dogs, all they just want to do is have a great life. He was able to calm himself down because biologically, he was no longer raved, and he was not stuck in this loop. So then, why am I telling you all this? So as we start to get great results, this has now been picked up by a lot of other institutions. One big one is Fort Bragg, which is where special forces are trained. About 10,000, 15,000 special forces have been treated so far by me and others. I have been trying to understand why do people not come and see me in droves. So part of the reason for that became obvious is that they don't want to be labeled with term PTSD. They don't want to be shamed by it. It makes people sound damaged. So then I tried to figure out what do I do about that? Well, it turns out other people have been thinking the same thing. So the proponent of the new term is Frank Ogbert. So Frank was a very famous psychiatrist. He's still alive. He's 87. And he came up with the term post-traumatic stress injury. Injury, meaning it's biologic. Meaning there's no shame to it. There's no difference between a broken leg and injury or a change in the brain. So he then connected with Peter Shirelli, a very famous four-star general Army, whose job was to prevent suicides. So Pete, not medical, he's just a line officer, asked a few thousand soldiers what would happen if he changed the name PTSD to PTSI, and they told him our bodies wouldn't be killing ourselves. Kind of pretty direct. So they united forces. They went to APA, American Psychiatric Association, 2013. Shockingly, the answer was no, we're not going to change it. And how they justified it was interesting. So then I took the same information and I did a study on 3,000 people. I asked 3,000 people on the survey, what would happen if the name is changed? So basically, three things came out of it. One, the stigma will reduce. There'll be more hope, and people will seek care. Nobody killed themselves if they have hope. So I took all of that and went to the APA. Guess what they said? Nah, we're not doing that. Because not enough information. You didn't do enough work. 3,000 people, just not good enough. I know. I felt the same way. So what I'm doing right now is I'm doing a big study. I'm trying to do 10,000 to 100,000 people. So everybody here and anybody you know, you can get to a website, itsptsi.com. Again, very subtle. Clearly, I work for subtlety. And then just fill out the survey. Costs nothing. It takes under 5 minutes. But that change may actually save your life or your loved one. Because if that change can start in APA, I think the stigma will get better and people will get better. So that's why I always say, change a letter, save a life. If you don't know which life, the more the better as far as I'm concerned. So the other things to remember, PTSD is not a lifestyle. You don't have to live in misery 50 years. The thinking is if you've had something conditioned for a longer amount of time, the harder it's going to be treated. That's not true. Not with this procedure at least. It seems it doesn't care how long you've had it. Thank you.